Hi, my name is Sunny Stubbs, and I am a second year student in the MFA in Theater Education program at the Mississippi University for Women. And this is my medieval pattern making project in my costume design and construction class. The prompt for this project is create and document the steps to creating the pattern of one garment from any of the three periods covered in the medieval section. So the garment I chose to make a pattern from is the 13th century woman's Cotehardie. I borrowed this picture from our lecture because this is the image that really inspired me. When I looked at this picture, my first thought was, oh, I want to make this. And almost immediately I could imagine the different pattern pieces, and I became really excited about the thought of making this garment. This particular dress is a little different than the others we've studied and what I found online. The darts in the bodice align to the folds in the skirt, and I love the way this drapes. So that's what I really was going for in my pattern. The materials I use for this project are butcher paper, sewing cutting mat, measurements, pencil, ruler, and my trusty tape measure. And also some personal weights and a 1x2 that I will discuss later. I took measurements from a model who I am really grateful for them helping me out, and I rounded all the measurements up. I primarily used a flat draping approach. My model also brought a fitted garment with her, and this was so helpful because as I took my measurements, I was able to constantly compare the measurements I was taking to that of the fitted garment. To begin my process, I first needed to really get everything straight in my head. I started by sketching out all of the pieces I would need and just getting it all straight in my head. And then I started making little notes as to the measurements around them. Next, I really dug in and started drawing everything to scale on graph paper. This was the heart of my process. I really took my time doing this part. I made some mistakes and had to start over, but this gave me a really clear look at the measurements and dimensions to scale. And once I knew the exact measurements, I just needed to scale the pattern up onto the butcher paper. Then I got started drafting each of the individual pieces. I created a front and back piece for the bodice. You need to cut 2 sections of fabric for the front and 1 for the back. The skirt has 4 different panels that flare out. You cut 2 pieces from the sleeve, and I also chose to have interfacing for the neckline. Once I started drafting and cutting the butcher paper, I really got going and didn't think about stopping to take pictures of myself cutting. So I did throw in some pictures of leftover scraps. So I'll talk more about this whole process though as I go. One of the biggest challenges that I ran into was flaring the skirt. As I said earlier, I knew that I wanted the panels of the skirt to line up with the darts and the bodice, and I really knew I wanted this. So I had to flare the skirt panels at the bottom on both sides. That required a tool for drawing a straight line that would have been longer than a yardstick, so I had to get really creative and problem solve. I found some hand weights to weight the butcher paper in an old 8-foot 1x2 that I could use to draw the straight lines. The next thing that I really enjoyed was notching the pattern. I have followed notches before, but I have never marked them on my own pattern. And I'm not ambidextrous. My phone was flipped and I didn't realize it. This is the final project, and I'm really happy with how it came out. This is the first time I've ever made a pattern. So I was pleasantly surprised that my pattern had all the necessary pieces. All of the pattern pieces matched up, and I really liked the look of the pattern. It made me want to put it together. I want to close by talking about the skills I developed while working on this project. Most importantly, I developed a much deeper conceptual understanding of flat draping and pattern construction. This happened when I really sat down and with the graph paper and measurements and created pattern pieces to scale on the graph paper. Then I transfer these to the real pattern pieces, and I could really start to see how the pattern pieces were lining up. I could see how the front bodice lined up to panels A and B of the skirt perfectly. I could see how the back bodice lined up to panels C and D of the skirt. I could see how the sides of the front and the back of the bodice lined up perfectly, how the shoulders lined up perfectly, and even the interfacing was just perfect fit. And so that's when I really started to become clear on how these measurements and the pieces come together. And I really think this connection really kind of came and happened from studying and measuring the darts and then creating them. I could really see all the pieces coming together when I started notching the pattern. And there is something very satisfying about notching your own pattern when everything's lining up. Here's my work cited. As you can see, I heavily relied on our program professors and fiber artists who are also content creators. This concludes my medieval pattern making project. Thank you so much. I learned so much from creating this Cotehardie pattern. I really enjoyed this process and loved making this pattern. It was an amazing experience. Thank you.